Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm Windrunner.
Also joining us is Evgeni.
Hi, I am either a Dawnshard or I have a Dawnshard. We don't know.
Yep. And we also have Cast in Shadow, Grace.
Hey, I'm Gatorgirl.
And the sun went down, that's why, yeah. So
the Midnight Mother.
We are recording this significantly later because this is a twofer, so this makes sense. Mm-hmm. And lastly, we have David,
who would rather be a Dawnshard bearer than a Dawnshard, but whatever. And I am Windrunner on the forums.
And I'm Chaos, and this is our second Dawnshard episode, and we're going right in to the lore of Dawnshards. This is a full spoiler for Dawnshard and the whole Cosmere, like ridiculously so.
But
no rhythm of war.
No Rhythm of War. Yes, right. That will be next week where we'll have Rhythm of War podcast probably.
Also, word of caution, listeners. We are going to go into the weeds. Of Cosmere lore. We are going to be talking intent. We are going to be talking commands. Mm-hmm. We are going to be talking spiritual mumbo jumbo. So if you are faint of heart and your spirit web has been
good talk
spiked. I don't know. It's gonna get here.
There's a lot of stuff going on here. And so really this is Dawnsharcast for reals. We actually know something about Dawnshards finally. Yes.
Mm-hmm. They're unmade.
No. The one thing that they're not is that they're I think this definitively means Dawnshards are not unmade.
I regret to say yes. That my theory is dead.
Rip.
You would rather have that theory be right than this really cool and awesome.
Oh no, I'm 100% okay with like.
There we go.
I only furthered that theory as much as I did because it annoyed David so much.
Sounds about right.
It's 90% it was just to annoy David. 10% I thought it was legit.
So we have to start with the underground caverns of Avia, which we actually see, and Risen and Cord, their Cord takes them off the boat to escape the Sleepless, and Mandras lead them down below into a very specific cavern. Mm-hmm. And that cavern has a very, very interesting thing there. It's got this crazy mural with I guess the Dawnshard in it. Okay.
Now, did it have the Dawnshard in it, or was it the Dawnshard?
God, I hate
the words written around the edges, the words of the command that had been imbued with the Dawnshard.
So it begins.
If you guys don't know, I guess we'll get into the word of Brandon now. So, they say in this that Risen became the Dawnshard. She is the Dawnshard. Now, I thought this was very annoying because a decade ago, Brandon was doing the same thing with shards and vessels, and it's that's kind of true, but then later he had a vessel, the word vessel for a thing, and it wasn't oh yeah, the person is the shard. And now he's just doing it again, and so I'm annoyed, and Brandon was saying on Reddit, oh yeah, no, she is the Dawnshard, and was using it in other things, so I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Bah! Irritated.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, because it irritates me.
I am okay with this being because even to this day, even with the knowledge of the term vessel, I'm okay with saying Raze is odium versus Raze holds odium.
I mean,
versus
that's true.
Raze is the vessel of odium, right?
That's all true. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about the damn mural. It already starts.
So Risen has found this chamber. There's a metal door for some reason, and she walks in, and she finds a place with, and I begin the quote. On its walls, they found strange murals, people with hands forward, falling through what appeared to be portals, emerging into light. So that is in the hallway, and then they move forward, and there's a small room. And there's another mural there. Incredible mural that dominated the far wall. It depicted a sun being shattered into pieces. The mural, it was circular and inlaid with golden foil. It seemed to glow with its own light. The writing on parts of it was unfamiliar to Risen. She hadn't seen the script during any of her travels. It wasn't even the dawn chant. The peculiar letters were art themselves, curling around the outside of the exploding sun, which was divided into mostly symmetrical pieces. 4 of them, each in turn broken into 4 smaller sections. She also feels heat just washing over her from that sun. It was not angry, though she knew it was being ripped apart like a person on some awful torture device. She felt something emanating from it. Resignation, confidence, understanding. And then she goes on and wonders about who created it. She counts the shards, lowercase, in her mind over and over, feeling a reverence to the number, and the number is 16.
Yeah.
The sun held her.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there.
So there are about 3 things going on here, and I think the easiest one to tackle is the very beginning. So hallway, and there are murals on the walls, and those murals depict people jumping into portals. We've seen this theme of like circles or ovals or portals, and people kind of reaching towards them or jumping into them. This is, I think, clearly depicting a perpendicularity.
Yep. Agreed.
There's no doubt about that. The only thing here, well, 2 things that are interesting to me. One, the fact that these murals are here in the undersea caverns of Amia. And 2, I am especially interested in the fact that these people are emerging into what looks to Risen to be light. Normally, when people go through perpendicularities, they show up on the other side. They show up in Shadesmar. And Shadesmar, it looks weird, but it kind of looks like a real world in some ways. Yeah, it might be one made of mist or spheres, but it looks like a place.
We have the sun and it's inverted and things like that. And this is not that. This is light.
This doesn't appear to be that.
Yeah.
And so what I wondered when I first saw this was, well, are we looking at still perpendicularities, but people going into or through the spiritual realm?
That's just what I was thinking as you were
which
saying
has
this.
been described as light, right? And in fact, the reason something like Stormlight or something like gems and spheres infused with Stormlight glow is not because Stormlight inherently glows, but because it's essentially a tiny, tiny perpendicularity, and you have the power from the spiritual realm kind of glowing, manifesting as light through this. So when I thought of that, I thought of Ashen and the exodus of the people from Ashen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we do have that Oathbringer illustration, I think, at the beginning of part 1 that shows essentially like a portal or a gate and people coming out of it and like flames chasing them, right? And so that doesn't fit with this idea. But we also have Words of Brandon, where Brandon has been toying with the idea of having the people escape Ashen not quite like they would through oath gates, more like spiritual equivalent of oath gates, right? And so
I thought that was described slightly differently, but and that the oath gates worked by going through the spiritual realm, and he wanted it to be the same sort of thing,
perhaps
that wob. But I don't know if that's directly relevant, but I just didn't want to accidentally miss
Sure. Yeah. No, fair.
This is interesting because, like, if I'm just reminded of the mural, like in Elantris, right? When they're going to the pool, right? They had a depiction of Shadesmar, but there was just one pool, right? Like, this is a lot of portals is interesting, right? Because typically you wouldn't have a lot of perpendicularities in a place. I guess that's what is interesting to me about that.
Yeah, I know. I can never decide if like Honor's perpendicularity in the past was in a more accessible format periodically, or if it's just depicting the fact that cultivation might have a number of perpendicularities in the various Horneater oceans.
Sure.
Kind of. I'm not sure which. That has always kind of been interesting to me, that it seems like there's more than one Horneater ocean that probably has a perpendicularity.
I am leaning towards the latter, because if you look at the colorful map of Roshar, you look at the Horneater peaks, there is a number of little lakes in there. And so
which is a cool detail.
Yeah. So I think it's reasonable it's not guaranteed, but it's reasonable to assume that each one of these is a perpendicularity.
What if, oh my god, this is already, we're like, word one, let's go. What if this is not about the Rosharan system at all, and this is more some representation of something from Yolen, and this is depicting some sort of exodus from Yolen, perhaps, of people going somewhere else, or maybe this is some depiction, like some representation of what people would think it means to ascend. Like people going through a portal and then like going into light because it kind of vaporized. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I like that idea though, because I want it to be tied to the shattering of Aiden Alcim in some way, because that's the context of the other mural.
Right,
That's
exactly,
really
right? Yeah. So it doesn't feel like Ashen, right? Like that.
Probably not.
Yeah.
We do know, so Cord a little later tells us that this particular Dawnshard arrived at some point in the past through cultivation's perpendicularity in the peaks.
Right.
And so it would make sense for like everything in this area to be relevant to that in some way.
Yeah.
Man,
I had like one other crack, just like theory taking a totally different direction, which would just be that they use, like, you know, you can use the perpendicularity to get into the cognitive realm, but I also think you can probably get away with more spiritual type stuff than we have seen so far. And so I do think that they could maybe have been doing some sort of future sight shenanigans and being like, oh, okay, where does this Dawnshard need to go? Where does it need to end up? Where can we put it? And potentially that was sort of a little bit like, okay, they were scrying or doing something like that, potentially. But that's a little bit out there.
I think I can buy that, yeah.
My kind of more crack theory is like, what if it's representative of people becoming a Dawnshard? Like the later mural pulses with light. Like somehow, I mean, I don't know how the perpendicularities would play into it, but like the idea of kind of falling into this light of the Dawnshard. I don't know.
This is so crazy. Oh my god! Like this is just like where you're like, what is happening? Oh my god!
And this is the easy stuff.
This is the easy stuff. This is easy stuff.
There may be something that we can tease out of this line, but I think it's going to be the type of thing where we just keep iterating on this. And in the interest of moving the show along, to other and more spicy things.
Yeah. So
the other mural?
Yeah, so we got another mural. We have an exploding sun divided into mostly symmetrical pieces, 4 of them each in turn broken into 4 smaller sections.
And there's also weird writing.
And there's also weird writing that is not even Dawnchant, which is important.
Which I have an idea about.
Yeah, I know.
So Aeons are language that exist independent of human design.
Yep, right.
I think that more or less, like, I think
there's some asterisk, but yes,
this is something similar. Like, this is not a like human designed language. This is like some like fundamental like coding of the Cosmere.
Okay, yeah, I can buy that. Yeah, like yeah. All right, I'm down with like, something like that.
This is the language Aiden Alzium spoke when he gave the command.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. It's something I don't even know. It is very cool though that it's I assume even older than the Dawnchant.
Because Dawnchant is so old, right? Like
so I think that is completely viable. And I kind of like it. The direction I went to when I was reading this was that the murals we saw before with the people emerging into light, I do think they depict some kind of exodus, and I do think, or at least migration or movement. And I think what they depict is people carrying the Dawnshard to Urshar. And so if those people are different, because like the language we see here is not necessarily older than the Dawn chant, it is just
different. Yeah, that's true.
It's something else. So like we might be looking at some Yolish writing, right? So people may have taken one of the Dawnshards from Yolen and then gone through perpendicularities. It is a little, well, I'm going to ignore that because it weakens my theory. So they take the Dawnshard from Yolen and they bring it here, and they, for some reason, inscribe stuff in the mural in their language. Maybe it says, "Beware, there be dragons."
Mm-hmm. I think that the words on the Dawnshard have heavily to do with what the Dawnshard is. I don't think that it's like a wording like this is a Dawnshard. Like I think the most important part of the mural are those words.
Well, there's so many questions with this. Like, we see this Dawnshard like enter Risen. She needs to accept it. It won't happen unwillingly. But it's just weird if we think that like humans can have these Dawnshards, or like any sapient race, right? How you get it in a mural, like it's just very bizarre, right?
I have a theory. It's a weird theory.
Okay, all right, cool, great.
The theory. It is not unprecedented in the Cosmere that somebody can create art with a little bit of investiture in it, because we know that someone painting with enough breaths can create interpretable images that can sometimes give the return visions. And so I think potentially someone who had the Dawnshard and was knowledgeable enough could have potentially put the Dawnshard in the wall through this act of creation and making this mural.
And maybe the words are like important to like hold it, I guess.
I think that, like, I honestly believe those are the words Adonalsium probably spoke, if you can say that Adonalsium spoke anything. That was the original Dawnshard command.
So speaking of that, let's actually just quickly reread from our last episode about what the Dawnshards are, because it's obviously incredibly relevant to this.
So to recite this quote,
yes,
this is Nickley explaining Dawnshards. Mere words cannot explain. The Dawnshards are commands risen, the will of a god. The most powerful forms of surge binding transcend traditional mortal understanding. All their greatest applications require intent and a command. Demands on a level no more person could ever manage alone. To make such commands, one must have the reasoning, the breadth of understanding of a deity. And so, the Dawnshards, the four primal commands that created all things. And then, eventually, they were used to undo Adonalsium itself.
Well, mere words cannot explain. There goes your theory, David.
It can be encapsulated in words without being explained by words.
Yeah. These are not mere words. These are the words of a god.
See, okay,
a lot of intent behind them.
I think this mural is more like the well, where like I mean maybe like gathering over time. Maybe it was used and it had to like regather in the mural, and then
that's
like
actually a really interesting point
by Cheery and the Mandras.
But it did seem like it was needed to be guarded for like a very long time, right? That's the thing with the Sleepless and the the Lancers seemed to they were the ancient guardians, so they were the people. They've been guarding it a long time, so I think that's interesting, though.
I had a thought similar to David's, where so we know that investiture in the Cosmere can reside in both objects and in humans, right? We've seen spheres that hold stormlight and Nice Radiant, who can absorb that stormlight and do things with it.
Even just metal mines, things like that.
Yeah. This doesn't feel like that. What this feels a lot like to me, and I could be predisposed to think this way because of command stuff, is breath. this seems very similar to me to somebody who had the Dawnshard at some point, or was the Dawnshard at some point, and then infused and infused is a word that Risen uses. Infused the Dawnshard into the mural.
Okay.
To just kind of let it sit there, like, for a while. And now Risen shows up and is sensing that. And now that Risen has accepted the Dawnshard, it now resides in her in the same way that a breath resides in somebody, and like integrates with her spirit web. Whereas while it was in the mural, like, it wasn't integrating with the mural's spirit web, right? It was just hanging out there.
It's like putting like breath in something, but not awakening.
In a shawl or something, yeah.
Sitting it there.
I think that parallel's fine.
That I actually don't hate that.
I like how you're surprised. It's like, wow, Evgeni, you said something that I don't hate. Oh, cool.
Well, no, it's because I have a hot take.
Okay, all right.
Whereas I am somewhat skeptical that the Dawnshard is investiture. Like, at least it's not like investiture like a shard.
It is definitely not like a shard. Yeah, for sure.
It's like this weird thing, like, which, like, this, we'll probably get into this more later on, and like how the Dawnshards are created. But it's like, it's not like a pool of power that does a thing. Like,
Risen doesn't vaporize having it.
Would you?
Yeah, but like, I like the idea because it's similar to something like I've been toying with in the back of my head of like it integrating with like her spirit web. Whereas like, I think like it's integrating into her mind. Like,
I don't
which like kind of explains. Go ahead.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think it is investiture in the same way that maybe connection is?
More closer to that, I think.
So like it's technically investiture, but it's this weird kind of, the function is far more important than the quantity.
Yeah, it's like it's investiture on a technicality. Like you can't use it as like fuel. Like it's a thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I was gonna say it does kind of, like, we know because of one of the Brandon Wobbs basically that Risen is having these heightening like effects because it is that she has taken in some investiture. So we know that it's not investiture, but I do think that it's like, if it's investiture that exists to keep the command existing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's not,
I'm with you.
It's not power that it can be used for something. It's just power that is imbued with this command.
Yeah. Like, you need power to make the command, right?
Like, persist, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it can't just sit there.
Yeah, but it's you're not gonna like, I mean, I guess you couldn't like use it directly. You can't utilize the energy in that there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's something like, it's investiture in the same way like your thoughts are investiture technically. Like,
yeah,
so you can convert them into investiture like with memories. Like,
sure.
So it's like everything is investiture, sort of.
If something is to exist in the Cosmere, it is either going to be matter, it's going to be energy, or it's going to be investiture. And the Dawnshard is not matter, and it's not energy. So it's some kind of funky, weird it's magic stuff. It's what it is.
Oh yeah, very, very much. But it is, I think, the key difference between a Dawnshard versus the Shards of Adenalcium is like, the Shards of Adenalcium is like tons of investiture. You pick it up, you are vaporized, you become investiture, and you command that. That is not at all what this is.
A shard is a chunk of God's power, and a Dawnshard is a chunk of God's will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, yep. Speaking of what God was thinking, on this mural, she could feel the heat of that sun burning, washing over her. It was not angry, though she knew it was being ripped apart like a person on some awful torture device. She felt something emanating from it: resignation, confidence, understanding. Okay, so this is referring to Adenalcium pretty clearly, right? Like, it's like, gotta be, right?
I would be surprised and also a little betrayed if that was not the case.
Yeah. I think that's clearly the implication here. Okay, so, well, what can we get from this? This definitely provides support for Adenalcium, well, maybe not wanted to be shattered. That might be, like, too strong of a word, but, like, understood it and, like, wasn't angry about it.
Wasn't a sneak attack. It was, at least it knew it was happening when it was happening.
Yeah. Which raises so many questions.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that it was likened to like a torture device. I've never considered what Adenalcium might have experienced when this was happening. And so
I think it's fun.
That doesn't sound like it's a fun impression that Risen got out of there.
I don't think breaking anything really apart into 16 pieces is a particularly fun experience if you're at all cognizant of it. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd always just kind of imagined it more like a single like instantaneous event, but like the torture
breaking,
like the torture side of it sounds like, well, that might have taken a little bit.
Literally like pulling God into 16 pieces or something like that, right?
Yeah. It's not shattering glass. It's cutting up a person.
I think just like a big pull. Like you're pulling it into 16 directions in a sense.
I don't want to read too much into this because it's kind of a single line and it's a bit of a throwaway line. And it could easily be attributed to just Risen just trying to explain things to the reader.
Impressions,
One thing that I am very interested in is whether we think it was only her who could feel this heat and see this glow from the mural. Because Corrid was also right there.
She did not seem to notice anything.
She didn't seem to notice anything.
Do you think this is like a shard where you need to have some connection to like the Dawnshard in order to be able to take it up?
I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that connection and spiritual mumbo jumbo isn't relevant somehow.
So
it's an attuning force.
Oh God, don't bring that up. No.
There's the question of like, this might have been in our outline for the first episode, but I don't think it got brought up. Of like,
I don't know
why was Risen brought here? Like, there's more than like.
There's several stages here.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe destiny.
Destiny, maybe.
Larkin cognitive shadows.
Maybe destiny is the only way to talk about destiny.
But yeah, it's like it was her destiny to take up this Dawnshard, so she could feel.
She gets the Dawnshard because she always will get the Dawnshard. I mean, to be honest, that logic works. But let me walk the listeners through. Like somehow the Larkin needed to get to the Taina, and the Taina needed to give the Larkin to Risen, and then Risen needed to go to Amia, and then the Mandras lead them into the cavern, and the Dawnshard recognizes Risen. Recognizes is not the right word. But
interacts with
Risen. Yeah, you know what I mean. So like there's a lot of steps in that process to get her here, and I don't think like a Sleepless could take it up. Like
I think the Sleepless were being manipulated as much as Risen was, and whatever happened here. Like if manipulation is the right word.
But
I wouldn't say manipulated. I'd say they were just being kind of left out of, and I'm throwing like 15 air quotes here. Of the Dawnshards' plan.
Yeah, because they weren't the original Guardians. They're just like, Dawnshards are bad stuff. We shouldn't have random people come in here. Yeah. Like, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm giving the Larkin just a lot of credit. Like, I think there's something big going on with that.
Yeah.
So it seems incredible to me that this plan goes all the way back to like pre-Reluna, pre-Reshi Isles, pre-Taina stuff. So like, I don't think this was planned or destined or preordained in any way, shape, or form until recently.
Until like Risen got the Larkin, maybe? Like that's like when it started?
Well, so I think Risen got Chiri.
The Risen Dawnshard, easy. That's
no. The Lopen has been affecting me.
Ah, yes.
So I think Risen got Chiri purely on merit.
Yeah, okay.
I think
Maybe.
I think.
I mean, that's possible, David.
There is a maybe there, and I acknowledge that. But I think that was just her like performing a thing that the Great Shell recognized as thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason Risen was chosen to be this Dawnshard was because of Chiri. Like, I think Chiri was the deciding factor in this. I think the fact that Risen took care of the Larkin, and in the way that she took care of the Larkin, we know that the Taina, the Reshi Isle Great Shells, can communicate in some way with the people there. And so I don't know if the Larkin are like I always get sapient and sentient mixed up. I don't think they're sentient, but they might be sapient, right?
No, it has to be the other way around.
The lower version of that.
So they might not be sapient, but they may be sentient.
Sure, yeah. Because we also have a thing where Risen feels like Chiri can sometimes understand her.
Mm,
and so I wonder if it's kind of like, well, Chiri recognize, and I'm speaking vague literary terms here, but like recognize the goodness or the worthiness of Risen and was like, okay, well, this person
is what we want.
Is what we want. Yeah.
David, what's up?
I think that two things. One is I don't know that, like, you know, I think Risen treated Chiri well, but I don't know if Risen like treated Chiri like in an incredible way that no one who has a pet Larkin, you know what I mean? That the other ones didn't grow. So
you're good enough to get a fragment of one of these four things. Oh God,
how many people have pet Larkins?
At least two others, you know, and they didn't grow. But I feel like Chiri is on a mission here. It's kind of my thought.
That's possible too. Yeah.
But the other thing that makes me wonder if there was still some plan for Risen back when she fell is that she seemed to believe in this novella that the Mandras had something to do with catching her there and breaking her fall. That's
actually a really good point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think she had to make the choice with the Great Shell to like be bold, as she said, and like climb down and speak. But I think once she did that, like the plan was in motion. I think the top, whatever the Great Shell's name is, like I think the Great Shell, I think my personal theory is like the Great Shell communicated with the Mandras and like helped slow her fall, and like from there things were put into motion for her to become.
It's mentioned that the Wren of the island saved her.
Yeah. I feel like we might even like have seen Spren around her as she falls. But if it's not canon, then it's very commonly accepted that it was a bunch of Spren that slowed her.
Spren were definitely confirmed to be involved with her being safe. So we know that since the Sleepless took over the charge of guarding the Dawnshard, they've been very like, nobody can use this Dawnshard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What if when the Larkin, the Lancerin were in charge, they would periodically allow someone to use it? Because like they know that like if that person gets out of control, they can suck out the investiture and stop them from destroying the planet. So it's like the people chosen by the Lancerin are allowed to use it.
That would be consistent with Honor acting like the Dawnshards had been an option in previous escalations to be used and were not this time. Potentially.
So like what I'm kind of picturing is like the ancient Larkins and Lancerins were like almost like Rishadium, where they choose their riders, but like once you're chosen by a Lancerin, you also like have the potential to use a Dawnshard.
Potentially.
I was gonna say like Radiant Spren.
The only issue with that, Ian, is I guess Larkin can eat up breath, right? And it would be dangerous to Vasher, but like in some sense, breath is designed to be like moved.
Yeah,
right.
Well, to be clear, like they wouldn't eat the Dawnshard. They would just like remove like any other investiture. So it's like the Dawnshard couldn't be used.
Oh, okay, sure, okay. I'm with you now. All right. I was like thinking like you were saying that they could like suck out the Dawnshard out of someone. I was like, yeah, no, I don't think that quite works.
Which is still a maybe.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the Lancerin, we don't know anything about them. But they can do all sorts of weird crap. Like we have no clue. Like all we have is cheery, and that's it. And I imagine they can do crazy stuff fully grown because clearly they were fully capable of guarding the Dawnshard very effectively. It sounds like they had no issue with that and did not require the Sleepless's help.
Yeah, and the Sleepless aren't doing the best job in the world as it is either. So I feel like the Lancerin were probably better at it.
Probably, yeah.
I think the Storm is doing all the work, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's most of the work. I want to get a little back to the mural. I mean, I know we know this episode. We're going where the conversation takes us. But with the mural, so the Dawnshards are commands created by Aiden Alcium. Right?
Yes.
It is just interesting to me because Nickley describes it as the commands that created all things. So it, to me, that sort of seems like Aiden Alcium existed. Aiden Alcium made these Dawnshards, which allowed him to do other things, like there were very specific commands or something like that. So it's interesting to me that Risen is getting information about the Shattering from this. Because, like, presumably the Dawnshards existed, way before the Shattering, right? If they were responsible for the creation of all things. So
they existed in some form.
In some form. We don't really know what that means, but it's just very interesting that she feels like what Aiden Alcium felt from the Shattering. Like, that's very bizarre, in a sense.
Well, if it was a weapon used to shatter him, like, I could definitely...
okay, all right, that's actually a very simple way to deal with that. Yeah, okay. All right, never mind. Comment retracted. That actually makes perfect sense. I was very racking my brain, like, how the hell does that work?
No, I
saying, though. Yeah.
I think that is still a little weird, but it's at least plausible that through the power of spiritual mumbo-jumbo, the weapon that destroyed Aiden Alcium would have been imprinted with some of Aiden Alcium's
especially because the Dawnshard would be connected to Aiden Alcium, right? Like there's a lot of things that you could have,
it's
right?
like how Spren are still a part of Honor even when they're separate.
So
the Dawnshard is still part of Aiden Alcium.
And it's also in a mural of the Shattering of Aiden Alcium. So she's like connecting with this and looking at this thing and going, what's this thing about? The Dawnshard, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's reasons that it would be in a position to be like, oh yeah, this is you're getting a little bit of something about this event while you're staring at a depiction of this event.
Yes.
There is also the possibility that the mural and the Dawnshard are distinct artifacts from ancient times. And so this is not just a mural that somebody painted because they thought it was cool. This is something that was like the mural itself has power and has meaning.
I don't think that's true. But just based on the way Risen looks at the mural and she's like, it's just a mural now. Like she's like, if you trust her impression, she seems to be very confident there's nothing special about it, aside from the fact that it could have been something really cool that someone made a long time ago, just independently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's... It's just very interesting how this Dawnshard, like, I guess it doesn't have a mind of its own in a sense, because like Risen is just like immediately gaining these impressions and like it's almost like she's thinking them, right? Yeah, Grace?
An idea about these impressions. So this Dawnshard is about like change, right?
Yeah, right.
And like, when did things change in the Cosmere, if not at the Shattering?
I was going to make a joke, actually, about how when it's like, well, something different happened with the portals that people were going in. It's like, they changed? That was a stupid joke. But yeah, that's certainly that's a big change.
I don't know.
So I'm very torn on how alive or how thinking this Dawnshard is. Because my initial reading was that because like the very first time we see Risen interact with it is when she recognizes that some of her thoughts are not her thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so I thought maybe this is just her mind kind of interpreting the nature of the thing that she's looking at, right?
Yeah.
However, at the end of chapter 19, there is so immediately after Nickley says she's the Dawnshard now.
Yep.
Risen is thinking, what have I done? Well, you needed to. Another part of her thought. You have adapted. You have remade yourself. And while that can be her thought, kind of like thinking to herself, it feels more external than before.
Yeah,
it feels like a separate entity.
Yeah.
Another wild idea. What if each of the Dawnshards used to kill Aiden Alzium now has like a piece of his cognitive shadow inside of it?
I mean, that's very plausible, to be honest.
Like the shards were the spiritual part of Aiden Alzium torn into 16 pieces. And like these Dawnshards like tore his mind into 4 pieces and each took a little bit of it within them or something. I don't know.
I'm not ready for takes this hot.
I definitely think there's possibly something there.
I think it's very plausible. Personally, I don't think the Dawnshard has a mind of its own. Like, I think it functions by integrating into a living being's mind, cognitive aspect. And like, I have this understanding of it in my mind that I don't know if I can put into words. But it's like, Risen is still having those thoughts, but it's based off of a part of her cognitive aspect that is not entirely hers.
No, I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
So like, yes, it's external, but it's also internal.
Like, because it's using Risen to build.
It's like now that she is the Dawnshard, those are like one and the same.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like adding like an additional piece of software into the hardware that is her brain. Maybe like it's being integrated into Risen, which is why like she is the Dawnshard, because like it's all like mixed together.
It's weird that it does seem to have like information in there though. You know what I mean? Like it's recognizing the Larkins and it's got this name that she doesn't know anything about with the Guardians of Ancient Sin. So it is. Go for it, Eric. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, I want to read these lines just so we're all on the same page. So this is very shortly after the understanding. It's like she thinks this is the real treasure. She thought, though she didn't know why, those words burning on the wall. A bit later, you were brought here, she thought to herself, by one of the Guardians of Ancient Sins. Of course she had been. That made sense. Wait, did it? Yes, she thought. You were.
I love that.
Yeah, I know, right? There are few of them left, and so the sleepless take up the task. And then, naturally, all that nonsense on the surface of the island, distractions. And then we go, the mural's calling her, there's a pressure on the island, blah, 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 getting gems, cool, nice. Guardian of Ancient Sins, she thought. What did that mean? Why did the idea repeat over and over in her mind? She felt the mural looming, overshadowing her. Slowly she turned and gazed up at the exploding sun. Accept it. Know it. Change. And then it was waiting for her to say yes. And like it doesn't seem like there's no like the light consumed her, but she's like, oh yeah, I'm not useless. And then she's gonna go negotiate with Nickley. But it's just interesting. I guess what I'm getting from this, though I don't think you can talk with the Dawnshard really, there's more of a cognitive component to this Dawnshard than say a shard of Aiden Alzium. Because we don't really see that with a shard per se, though we do, like Vin knows how the power was used in the past and stuff, so like there is knowledge there, but I'm just saying that that's an interesting distinction.
But we do know that if you left a shard alone, like it would eventually develop a sentience or sapience. Like it would develop a mind of its own.
Sure. Yeah.
To me, it makes sense that Dawnshards would be more cognitive than shards, though, because, like, as I said earlier, like, the spiritual is power, but the idea of, like, this is Adenalsium's will, and the will is, like, of the mind, and you can't do anything with it itself, but it, like, filters power through to, like, amplify the effects. It just feels very cognitive to me. So I think that makes sense.
Brandon had talked about, like, a third hypothetical, like, cognitive state that was not, like, regular matter or investiture, and if that had actually been a thing, that's what I would say this was. It's just kind of like a weird cognitive type energy.
That was such a deep thought, Grace, because this is going back to... Oh, man. Give me a second.
You just blew Eric's mind, Grace.
No, you really did. You really did. This actually really changes my intent video that I'm going to make. I'm going to be totally honest.
I stunned Eric speechless with my... It just makes so much sense to me, because they always talk about the cognitive as the filter between the spiritual and the physical. And, like, what is the Dawnshard if not a filter for power? Like, to amplify it, to make the surge bindings greater.
Yeah, and I do totally agree with that.
I was gonna say, I was interested in the idea of the Dawnshard having been left alone for potentially thousands of years.
It feels like it hasn't been used for a very long time.
I do like the idea of it developing a little bit of mind of its own, because of the whole investiture seeks and or develops sentience.
I know. I'm trying to decide if I think that there's, like, knowledge in this Dawnshard or not, based on that longer paragraph when it talks about how it requires, like, the knowledge and the will, like the breath of knowledge that a god has. But I'm like, is it just a command that was created with that knowledge, or is it a command that contains that knowledge? And I'm not sure which it would be.
Do those need to be different?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so this is definitely getting into intent command. So we'll just plop this on screen. The big paragraph of info.
As we transition into this discussion of, like, intent and commands and how that all functions, I have an idea for how they were created.
Okay.
In that, like, I am skeptical of the idea that they were intentionally crafted. Like, I don't think, like, Adenalsium had the idea, like, okay, I will make these tools and I will use them to create everything. Like, I think he gave these commands, and it's like, as a consequence of doing so,
manifested.
The Dawnshards were created. Like, because, like, we know before the Shattering, the rules of investiture were whatever Adenalsium thought they were. Like, the rules of reality were whatever Adenalsium thought they were. So his thoughts
directly
are kind of a big deal.
That actually makes me worry that you would not want to accidentally undo a Dawnshard if those are the commands that are still, like, maintaining the original creation of reality.
Well, I don't know if they're still maintaining, but it's just like, in giving that command, it's like
it created a thing.
Created this thing that now persists on its own. So it's like, I don't think, like, destroying one, if that's even possible, would undo everything it had ever done.
I'm digging this, Ian. I like this. This is good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like the idea that they were created as tools isn't quite what I think actually happened.
No, I like that a lot. I really like that. That's a great way of thinking about it, I think.
I just don't know what would have happened that they would need to be, like, separate from Adenalsium, or, like, why.
That is weird.
Like, I get the idea. I get where you're coming from, but if he just, like, spoke these commands, why would they have, like, separated from him?
Well, like, philosophically, I feel like if he was going to create something, like, kind of external to himself, they would have to be external. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to like, he's giving a command to something that is not Adenalsium, and so it needs to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't give an internal command.
I guess, like, my idea was, like, because, like, he is, like, expressing this power that is, like it was going out from him, and that, like, twisted the Cosmere in, like, some way, and that
the power itself is
the Dawnshard.
Yeah. I mean, this could even go into like meta reasons and authorial/writerly reasons, right? So the way I think of these Dawnshards, the way I think of these commands is very much in the same way I think of Let It Be Light. Like, I think we are. Right, I think we are looking at this kind of command, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
and so, as a deeply religious man, I would not be shocked if this kind of thinking has creeped into Brandon's writing, because we know that other aspects of his religion have also shown up in his writing and in the Cosmere specifically, right?
We're very much getting into the creation myth here.
Yeah. I mean, this is the literal creation myth of the Cosmere. And so I think it is reasonable, whether or not you want to believe it is 100% up to you, but I think it's reasonable to assume that Brandon thinks of the creation of the Cosmere in similar terms as how he thinks of the creation of his world, right? But I guess his other world.
Yeah. Like that. We're getting into the deep stuff, so yeah, I mean that makes sense. Man, Grace, I'm still like, you saying intent, like intents are cognitive. Like it's very interesting. Like the most powerful forms of surge binding transcend traditional mortal understanding. All their greatest applications require intent and a command. Demands on a level no person could ever manage alone. You need to have the reasoning breadth of a deity, the primal commands. But so this is just very interesting because I don't know about you guys, but when we talked about intention, the concept, right? I think we would have conflated intent and command. Like that's kind of what I didn't quite understand, that these were separate things in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So how are we thinking that commands and intent are different?
The idea I had was intent is something you have. A command is something you give.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I have things to say and I have thoughts.
Great.
Okay. So intent and command, like we've already established that I think of the Dawnshards, I think of these commands as Let It Be Light type of commands, right? So these grand kind of, let's establish how the universe works. Okay.
Yep.
There's an asterisk here because different people have been defining the scope of these commands differently. So I kind of, the two main camps that I've seen are one where people think that the Dawnshards describe how the entire universe works, and the other camp is people where they think they describe kind of life, essentially. But also life in the Cosmere is a little weird because like even like chairs and rocks have cognitive aspects and things like that. So that's the asterisk. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
So intent and command. So that's command. I think when Nickley says intent, I think he means intention.
Okay.
I think he means a person or a shard's or an entity's will to do something, and also the specifics of how they imagine or visualize that something to happen. Because I think of all of this stuff in the context of Nalthis, where we've also seen command stuff, right? And also kind of intent stuff, even though it's not mentioned. Yes.
But so my only issue with that statement, I generally agree until you said visualization.
Yeah, that was my also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But I think visualization is a core component of how I think of this stuff.
Okay, please continue. But I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay. So thinking back to Nalthis and Awakening. The way... So Awakening feels similar to this, but there the command and the intent were kind of folded into one. Right.
Yes.
When Vasher was telling us about how awakening works, he was telling us about that, like needing command, needing fuel. What was the third one?
Color.
And color. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
But that's fuel. Oh no, that's breath. Okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
I think this breaks it down to more fundamental components. I think when Vasher says command, I think he
means both of these things. Intent
he
and
means
command.
The combination of intent and command.
Okay.
And so the way I differentiate between these is I think command is like fetch keys. I think that's a command.
Like the word itself?
Like the concept.
Yes. The concept, yes. And I think the way intent comes into this is in the specifics of how that concept comes to be. So the command is what you want, and the intent is whether you want that thing and how you want that thing to happen. So the example I've been using lately, which I hope will clear things up, is let's talk about fetch keys.
Me
fetch
too.
Keys.
I hope so.
So far, I am 100% with you.
So
I don't know.
So let's go to Nalthis and let's fetch some keys.
Yeah.
I think if a regular human or even a returned is awakening a straw man with the command to fetch keys, obviously that is the command, and the opening scenes of Warbreaker, the intent behind that command might be walk up to this guard, grab these keys from his belt, and return to me and drop the keys on the floor. Now, one of the things that Nickley says in this extremely overloaded paragraph,
seriously,
is that to make such commands, one must have the reasoning, the breadth of understanding of a deity. And so I think the way this plays into this is that the greater, the more expansive your intent, the more control you have over the command you were trying to give or to express or to fuel, right? And so if somebody like Endowment was to awaken the same straw man with the same command, I think the fact that Endowment's intent would be so much more complex or so much larger or so much deeper than somebody like Vasher's, it would mean that she can give the command with something like, well, leave the cell, go to the port, board the third ship on the right, travel for 2 weeks, get off on the second port, find this building, find this person in there, grab this one specific key that I need, and then follow a specific path back to me.
Okay. I think I'm with you, especially with you need the reasoning and breadth of understanding. Like, you can't just say, let there be light, right? You need the understanding of what that means, in a sense.
So, yes, mostly. A small caveat. So, obviously, Risen is now the Dawnshard, or this Dawnshard. Now, we don't have an exact name for this, but I think a lot of people are thinking of it as the Dawnshard of change or of remaking, things in that context, right?
Yeah.
So, for the sake of this example, let's say this command, this Dawnshard's command, is change.
Right.
And so, somebody like Risen, who has a mortal level of intent, mortal level of understanding of things. Well, first of all, she can't do jack because she doesn't have power. Like, she might have all of the intent that she wants. She has one of the 4 most powerful commands in existence. If she doesn't have power, she can't do anything about that.
True. I agree.
I think we all agree is why the Sleepless don't want her forming radiant bonds, right?
Yes.
Because
100%.
that would give her access to Stormlight, and then spooky things happen.
It's terrifying.
And so let's assume that she forms a radiant bond. Let's assume that she gains access to power in some way. So that would allow her to use this command, change command. The things she can do, the things she can change, will be limited by the scope of her intent. So while somebody like Adonalsium may have been able to like change the laws of physics, for example, in the Cosmere, while somebody like the Shard of Preservation may have been able to change the way allomancy works. For example, I'm not saying that Preservation used the Dawnshard. I think Risen would just not be capable of doing things like that. I think she'd be able to like change things in a magical way, but I think the scope of these changes would have been much more akin to, let's say, soul casting, right? So like not enough to change the universe, but it's still change that she is introducing into the universe.
I agree. I like that. Like, even if she had power, she's not going to be able to do things that a shard could do with a Dawnshard. I think.
Yeah, but it's still more than any other Radiant would be able to do.
Yeah.
Like far more, I think.
Probably, but let's say yes.
I agree. And I do want to mention, Brandon was saying Surge Binding is more just like general Cosmere magic, at least in the context of this paragraph. So not just like Radiant Bonds, right?
Yeah. So when Nicholas says the most powerful forms of Surge Binding, he means magic. The most powerful forms of magic.
Yeah. Because Rosharans suck at naming things.
Everything's a Spren and everything's Surge Binding.
And everyththing a chicken and everything's a wine.
I wonder why they came up with the word void binding, honestly.
Chris invented it. What if at the end of the day, it's just Chris wrote the word void binding and it's like, well, it's actually just surge binding. Rosharans would be like, Chris, it's actually just surge binding. Come on. Wouldn't that be? Yeah.
I kind of have my own ideas about like the difference between intent and command.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna liken this to like a person a bit. So a person, and really all objects and things in the spiritual realm have an identity, right?
All right, we're doing totally different tack. All right, I like it.
And that is a like intrinsic part of their spirit realm. So I think like these surge bindings, this magic is an action, right? And so I think intent is almost like the equivalent of identity to that action. So it's like every time you do something, you have an intent behind it. And like, you know, when you stab someone, your intent could be to harm them. Your intent could be to steal something humalurgically. And that is just like part of what you are doing when you do that action. And the command is, I think, part of the action. Obviously, Awakening, we have verbal commands. And I think a lot of magics, I don't know if commands have to be verbal.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, at high level, at high heightenings,
you don't even need to.
You don't need to vocalize,
Your command is part of what you're doing, and it kind of gets across what you're doing. But I think intent is like the intrinsic what of it, almost like a version of identity equivalent to an action,
like the will of.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Would you say that the command kind of carries the intent to the action?
Yeah, I like that.
And then if you are skilled enough or powerful enough or whatever, you can impart the intent directly without a command.
I think the command is always there. It's whether or not it's vocalized.
Like when a Windrunner is doing a full lashing on something, they touch it and infuse it with Stormlight, and the act of kind of touching it might be the command, whereas like they will the Stormlight in, that is their intention. That is their intent, kind of. I mean, that's not a perfect example. I don't know if but that's sort of what I think.
I really like that a lot. It's like commands are like a defined thing. It's like fetch keys, stab person,
lash this.
Whereas intent can be much more like nebulous and nuanced and complicated. Whereas like you couldn't have 5 different people can give the command fetch keys and their intents can be different.
So I have a question for you, Grace. Is the visualization also in the intent then? in the context of splitting what a command is for awakening, which is the visualization and the intent, like Evgeni says, or in the command?
Okay.
This is important to me. Because I liked what Evgeni said. Like, I like what you're saying about the intent being a primal thing. I'm on board with that. I still don't quite understand where what a command is in Evgeni's sense. So just we're nitpicking.
Okay, I think
yeah.
From mine, I think visualization would have to be part of the command. I think if what command is how you convey an intent, then the visualization has to be a part of that, because that's the main way you're conveying it.
So,
I mean, with the words as well, but
I think that's what I think David, you and I were chatting a little bit about, like, what the hell is the difference between an intent and a command? And I think we were like, will versus the visualization. I suppose I am extremely biased because in Warbreaker it's like command, the visualization, right? Like that. But like, I don't think the word itself matter. Like, that doesn't really matter. What Warbreaker, I think, teaches, like, it matters a little bit, but not that much, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's not more like a constraint to your command as opposed to like something that was incredibly necessary. You know, I always felt like the most important part of the command was the visualization.
I think that's very clear.
I kind of balk at saying that the intent is the visualization.
It's
yeah,
maybe that's something we just. Yes,
I was going to say, I think if we're viewing command as a way to convey intent, then the visualization is like, has to be a part of that. And intent, if something is like intent is like intrinsic to your actions, then like there's no need to have a visualization part of it.
Interesting. So it's fascinating to me that we are actually coming from like opposite places, and I can see the merit in both, because the way I think of it is, so this Dawnshard is the command of change. On its own, this Dawnshard, this command, doesn't carry any specifics about what is to change, right? And so that's how I think of it. And so in my head, it is the intent that you apply, the intent behind the command that must shape the command into the exact manifestation you want, into the exact change that you want.
What if the visualization is the blending of the intent and
great.
It's like it's the bridging between like because the command is like what is happening, like how it is happening, what is happening. The command is the action that is to be taken. Your intent is what you want to happen. And the visualization is like how it is going to happen, which is kind of like bridging those two things.
I guess maybe, and then like just in a command, like you don't have to actually say the command part if you've got the visualization.
Yeah, it's like it's like the command is the command.
You can tell that we're right on the edge of our understanding by how often we just break into silence, where we're like, "Well, how do I say this?"
It's like the command is not the words.
Yeah,
the command is the action.
Yeah, but like, isn't the thing that you're visualizing the action you want? Isn't that what it is? Isn't that exactly how it works when you're awakening? That's exactly what it is. The thing you want to happen is the thing you're visualizing.
Yeah.
No, the visualization is like how it's going to happen.
I mean,
you're visualizing how you want it to happen.
Yeah, but I guess like, sorry, I guess we're differing in what the word action is. Because to me, if Vasher is like, go fetch keys, like, I feel like the visualization to make that action occur is all the important part, and it's like the word fetch key, like that doesn't really matter too much to me. Like the action is specifically getting those keys, right? And that's the visualization, and that's the important part.
Words do matter in...
They do.
Set arrangements of words matter in Awakening.
That's true. They do.
You can't just say, like, a random sentence.
That is true.
And it work as a command.
And it needs to be in your native language and stuff like that.
That, I think spiritual mumbo jumbo can
I'm just
play.
saying that the words do have some relevance in some respects. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
I just feel like the words are honestly I've always used them as like a crutch that you like. If you are not sufficiently skilled, you don't like. You need these words to help you.
Or sufficiently powerful.
Yeah, but you can transcend that and not need that part of the command.
Yeah, I think it's the verbalization of those words that is the crutch for me.
Yeah, but to me that means that the words aren't that important because you can transcend them. And that the specific words are only important because it's helpful to you that they are a command that is what you wanted to have happen. Now we're talking about Awakening, so I don't know.
No. There's a very important point here, and it is that in Awakening, and I know we are talking about Awakening again. Once you achieve a high enough heightening, you no longer need to verbalize your command.
Right.
And one of the effects of being a Dawnshard, of having a Dawnshard, is something that is very akin to having, what is it, like the third heightening?
At least. I am...
It's the third heightening for the things that we see her have.
Yeah. She might have more effects.
Yeah. And so, like, the parallel and so a word of Brandon that we have says that anyone... like this effect is not specific to this Dawnshard. It is not only, it's not specific to all of the Dawnshards, although they share it. It is specific to anyone who is invested enough for a period of time long enough for, like, I guess the investiture to seep in or whatever. And so I think the parallel here is strong, right? Where in one magic system, if you are very invested, it was like 7/8 heightening or whatever, you no longer need to vocalize your command. And now we have
10th.
Oh, was it 10th?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
it's a God
nonverbal
King
is
specific
10th.
power.
It's God King specific.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
A lot of power.
So super invested.
Yeah.
And now we have another magic system where somebody becomes somewhat invested and gets like some rungs up that ladder and gets similar effects. And so I don't have a point I'm trying to drive, but I think it's a lot of parallels that are very interesting.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fair.
It's just, I guess, I think where David is coming from, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, like, you believe that once, like, you can mentally awaken, the words don't matter. Correct?
I would say probably yes. I don't think you need to even, like, internally think the words if you are doing your visualization command and you are at a point where you can, like, clearly a really high point because it takes you to be the 10th heightening to be able to do that. But if you're at a point where you don't need to say the commands, you don't need to think those words, and that means that the words are not the most important part of the command.
Whereas for me, like, I think those words are always a part of the command, even if you're not speaking them.
Okay, go ahead. What's up?
Don't we have a wob on, like, verbalization of radiant oaths?
Yeah, like you don't need to say them. Yeah.
I think the more we talk about it, I think radiant oaths are a command.
Ooh,
all right, spicy. All right, let's go.
That is a good idea.
Let's go. Yeah, all right. Boom.
I think it just, when we were talking about this, I just thought of that, and it's like when we were talking about the verbalization and, like, the difference between the command and the intent, it just reminded me of radiant oaths a lot.
Yeah,
and the idea that you
can't
just say it, you have to have the intent behind it, but, like, it also has to be the right words. You have to have that right command to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, because Lif didn't need to speak her oath, right? Because she said it in her heart, right? Something like that.
Okay. But Lift also breaks rules, so
well,
I would want to see somebody who's not Lift not say their ideal and level up. But
so we got a bunch of Windrunners speaking their ideals, right? And we have one Windrunner who's spoken a bunch of ideals at all the wrong times, and the Stormfather's like, no, you gotta mean this.
Yep, right. Yes, right.
So obviously just the command is not enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
The command, yes. Okay.
Because he's lacking his intent.
Right, because he doesn't have the intent behind that, or he doesn't have the right intent behind that, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just gonna completely ignore all of the like investiture component or power component to all of this.
I hope there's some good emote faces of me, because God, my face is just like so crinkled from all this. Like, that's how I feel.
Because it's not enough to just say, I will protect those who cannot protect themselves, even the ones I hate. I don't know why I chose Kaladins, but whatever. Even from myself or whatever, right? You have to mean it, and meaning it means applying intent behind it.
Yeah,
okay.
That I agree with.
That's my new favorite definition of intent, at least in this sense, is meaning it. I think that makes sense in a lot of contexts.
I think Radiant Oaths are, if assuming they are actually like the best way to separate command and intent, because like you have to mean it, but you also have to say the right words. Like you can't just be like, oh, to get my next Windrunner oath, I like say like whatever. It has to be the right thing. I mean, and there's some variation behind that, but
it also like ties into, you can know the oaths. Like Skybreakers just lay it all out for you. It's like you can know what the oath is, but like you need the intent. You need the visualization of what that means for you. You need the specific words for you.
Yeah, so I object.
Okay.
And my objection is that, I mean, it's along the lines of what Ian said, right? So you can know that the third, so the exact phrasing of the third ideal, or any of the ideals, maybe outside of the first, but whatever. The exact phrasing is not as important, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because every Radiant gets a different one, or potentially different one.
At least variants.
Right. And so the words themselves are not the command. The words are, I almost want to say that they're not important. Like, as long as your intent is right, and as long as you're not like you're not going to be able to recite a recipe, a cake recipe, and mean protecting people who cannot protect themselves. Like, you got to align the things a little bit, but as long as they're in the same vein, I think you're okay.
But I don't think with Awakening, I think it's a similar thing with Awakening. Like, there are variations to say fetch keys that, like, you can say get keys, like bring me keys, like steal keys. I think it's the same thing. Like, if that's the command for Awakening, then I think the verbalization is also the command for Radiant Oaths, like that.
I agree with Grace.
Yeah. So I want to back it up a little bit, because we're all like talking about mortals commands. And I think with mortals, yeah, maybe saying words is useful. Adenalcium doesn't need to speak words. It's like, that doesn't matter, right? Like, yeah. I don't think he literally like, it's not like Adenalcium like spoke words, it vibrated. Like, that doesn't matter to Adenalcium.
You don't think he made like a Kandra voice box? And was just like, change.
Yeah, no, I don't think, no. So like, when I'm thinking about the Dawnshards, so we'll back it up a little bit. Like,
oh, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Like, I guess I don't think to gods the words matter. And so like, so when we're referring to the command, I guess does the command have the visualization or not? Huh?
No.
Words cannot comprehend. It's beyond mortal understanding.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So is the visualization in the intent or the command?
I don't know.
Well, let's go in circle. I think
put your comments below. Is visualization in the intent or visualization the command? Woo!
I think it's the intent.
Like, the way you said everything you said, Evgeni, makes sense, and like I think there's a lot of similarities between what you're saying and what Grace is saying, right? Because like what Grace, like when you're talking about the Radiant Oaths, the visualization's like the meaning in a sense. That it's like the meaning, and so that would sort of mean it's more of the intent. So in that respect, I don't know what commands are. So now I'm confused as to if the visualization's in the intent, I don't quite understand what a command is.
I mean, it's also fully possible that Radiant Oaths are not an example of this.
It's true.
That'd be fun.
It's just a theory.
It's so similar that I feel like it has to be working along the
meaning,
same
they're saying a thing. Yeah.
There's even like a little we learned in Dawnshard that you actually do get a little bit of Stormlight out when you say your ideal as well. It seemed to be what Huia was saying, which I always thought they just got more efficient.
If you're a Windrunner.
Well, true. I mean, like even in Words of Radiance, didn't Kaladin get a bunch of Stormlight when he saw the third ideal?
I thought he just became a lot more efficient with it, and it was like bam. But
no. When he got his blade, he didn't have any Stormlight, and then bam, blade, bam, Stormlight.
I think he did.
I did not pay attention to that then.
Well, it also mentions like the corridor going dark, which could mean like he sucked in all of that.
I guess that's true.
That's what I might have thought.
Okay, that's a good point.
I do think there is a burst of power.
I mean, clearly. Yes, there is. So clearly.
Yeah.
I think that once you start accumulating enough investiture, you start breaking the rules, which is the case with like the mental awakening, is like that you're starting to break the rules at that point.
Well, I agree, but then why is Nickley saying that intent in a command? Like clearly, like those are, even to gods, both components are important. That's what I think.
Okay, let me put my thinking this way. Is I think anything we see, pretty much anything we see the characters like do is going to be part of the command, because the intent is like intrinsic to the idea that they are trying to do something.
I don't disagree with any of that. So there's one more thing I wanted to bring up before we even started recording, and I forgot about it, but now I remembered it, so you have to deal with me. And that is that a lot of where I'm coming from with all of this command stuff and intent stuff is, I guess I hinted at that, but it's my belief that every act of magic in the Cosmere, and I'm using our understanding of magic. I'm not trying to frame this as a Cosmere scholar. Every act of magic requires intent, which I've shared my views on, a command, and a fuel source, or investiture, or power, or what have you. Right. And so I don't think any of this is controversial, right? And
I agree with all that.
Mm-hmm. That is why like Risen can do anything with the Dawnshard.
Yeah. Okay.
And
sure.
so I guess that is also why I don't think Radiant Oaths are like share the same framework as Dawnshards, right? Because there's like you can swear an oath and be completely dry of power, and it doesn't like you might get an infusion, but that's an after effect. That's not you're not pumping power into saying your oath.
I guess. I just feel like you're connected to this spren and like you're clearly pulling some power through. So who knows exactly what you're doing? Like there's power in the system because you're getting some out when you're done swearing this oath sometimes. So I don't want to exclude the concept that you could be doing something on a different realm with some power that your spren is providing, or it's just, you know.
I'll meet you on a maybe on this one.
Sounds good. That's a maybe from me too. So
great. And I think one more last thought of command, and honestly, I am more confused than before on where visualization goes, honestly. But I do think, this is one thing I do think. Remember back when we had the word focus? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think command is focus.
Nope.
I think the new Cosmere word for focus is just command. I think that's what that is. I agree. So I don't think the word focus, which was never really a thing. This is the thing Brandon told me, is like commands are a focus, metals are a focus, and ands are a focus. I think the command is the focus.
So would you say that metals are commands?
Kinda, yeah. Yeah, kinda.
So you think they're commands because they correspond to specific effects?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you need the intent
Oh,
to
maybe.
to choose to burn the metal.
So would you call the body focuses body command?
I mean, what? I don't even know what body focuses matter. Like, half the stuff in the Ars Arcana, I'm like, I don't even know what this is or what for. Like, I don't even know. What the hell are body focuses? Why have we done this?
I love that he made the table, and I'm like, why was this the thing you created lots of odd extraneous information for?
Then we have the 10 levels of void binding. Hey, what's up? It's in Way of Kings. It's just in the Ars Arcanum. Hey.
We are neck deep in mumbo jumbo. Don't just pour even more on top of us.
we're like barely through our outline here. Yeah, so let's talk about some other Dawnshards. Oh my god.
Okay, I've got to theorize Dawnshard.
Okay.
I think that there's one that is capable of binding any creature of void.
Wow, what a hot take.
Wow, hot take.
Just a feeling that I got.
Oh, I do want to remind people that Brandon has said one Dawnshard is different from the rest.
My crack theory is that one Dawnshard was the changed Dawnshard because it was currently in a mural and not in a person.
I mean, that's very plausible, I think.
It's a viable explanation, yeah.
Super viable.
So, may I give my ideas?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, as part of my idea, I am toying with the idea that each of the 4 Dawnshards has 4 shards that are associated with it.
Because that's kind of what the mural was depicting, right? 4 breaking into other.
Does anyone disagree with that idea, by the way?
No.
Okay, cool. Let's move on.
I just want to say one thing, because we didn't talk about it with the mural. I don't think, like, the 4... It's not that the Dawnshards turned into shards. I just want to make that clear. Because I think that if you read the mural a certain way, you might be thinking, like, oh, it broke into 4. Then those 4 are the Dawnshards. And then those 4 broke into the other shard. I don't think that's true. The Dawnshards still exist.
I think that the Dawnshard that was associated with its subset of 4 actual shards, though, probably had some influence on the intents that they ended up with. That I do believe is the case.
That gets into what I was part of my idea. It's like Aidenalzium like gave these 4 commands and like made the Cosmere.
Yep.
So it's like his investiture was used to operating across those 4 commands. So similar to how when the plane shattered, the plateau with the Oath Gate shattered into a circle because it was like the plate or a plate and it shatters along that scoring.
Yeah.
Aidenalzium shattered along the lines of the Dawnshards.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Like how vaguely. That's my rationale for why shards are associated with Dawnshards.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. So for my 4 ideas, there change, obviously.
Yep.
Which I think is associated with ruin and cultivation, which I don't think is.
Those are the only thing that I buy. That's like ruin and cultivation are under change. Done.
Yeah. I could also see endowment as being under change. Possibly.
Yeah, it's tricky without knowing the other 3. It's really hard.
Next is protection, which I think has preservation, honor, and maybe dominion. Maybe. The next one is feel.
Okay, yeah, I saw people talk. Yeah.
Feel.
Gotcha, okay.
Which is like devotion and odium.
Okay.
That's 6.
Ambition, maybe?
Ambition, maybe. And my last one was live.
Okay.
Which I put autonomy and ambition. Kind of like to be like its own living thing, like it must act independently of Aidenalzium. That's why I put autonomy there.
Yeah. I mean, okay, that does make sense.
Life needs to like strive to do something. So ambition, like
I think
To
autonomy
be honest,
is more.
I 100% forgot about autonomy and ambition for a very long time. And it's just like, I need, those two things. That live could, because at one point I was kind of conflating live and fuel as one thing.
I guess I just don't like protecting as one of the fundamental commands. Like that's the only issue that I have with that. Like I think live's interesting and feel is interesting.
I think I'd put bind, which is similar to protect, but more broad.
Yeah, I do think there is some sort of connection-y bind shard, Like that just seems to be the impression from that epigraph. Dawnshard, that is, I should say.
Was it Dawnshard singular? The Dawnshard. Taking the Dawnshard.
Yes, taking the Dawnshard.
Okay, so presumably that could just be one of the Dawnshards. Not every Dawnshard.
It could go either way.
Oh, what other reasoning why, protection. We know Hoid held a Dawnshard at some point. And that is why he's immortal and why he can't harm people or eat meat, apparently.
We will definitely talk about that Wob in detail. Which is crazy.
But if he's infused with the command of protection, that would protect him and protect other people from him.
If preservation wasn't a shard, I would say preservation or stasis or something for it.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
That's one of the reasons why I don't like stasis as a Dawnshard, which I have seen people it's stasis and create are two things that I've seen bandied about, and I hate both of them.
Yeah, I don't like either of them either.
See, okay, so I think mine were focused on fundamental things about life. I had the four I put were change, bind, think, and feel. And so it's people change and grow, people form bonds with one another, people feel emotions, and people have free thought. And I feel like those four things
I like that
are pretty fundamental to
think
the human experience.
Yeah, because these have to be very primal and basic, right? That's the thing. They need to be they're the primal commands.
If it hadn't said that these were the commands that Aiden also used to create all things, I would definitely like the idea that they were more focused around life itself, but I do feel in my read of it was that it was used for all of creation, so I do think that there might be a life specific one, and then the other three are something else. But
if all objects in the Cosmere have a cognitive and spiritual aspect, so I feel having a more life focused, having a more life focused thing is not too out of character. I don't think.
I'll buy that.
That's fair. That's a really good point, actually.
And that's, I think it was in this episode. That's exactly why I brought up the two camps of, if I didn't have my own idea, Grace's list is probably exactly the one I would have gone for.
I don't quite understand bind. The other three, I'm all right, yeah, but
I don't know. There was that one quote, and I needed a third one, and it kind of fits. So it's works.
I don't know.
Well enough.
I think it could just be connect.
Oh, all right, okay, all right. I like that better. That for some reason, the different word, the word made a difference. Hey, there you go.
Close one, but
yeah. I mean, yeah. I've always seen bind or whatever as connect, but yeah, different words can make a difference. So the breakdown that I had was perhaps I feel like it's the most basic or maybe most intuitive breakdown, and I definitely
most intuitive. Hot takes here, big claims.
The one that I think people will reach for, whether or not it is correct. While Grace is focusing on life and what defines life, and I've seen a lot of other people focus on these things, and I've seen enumerations well, if Risen has change or remake, what if there is make, unmake, and usually there's a fourth one that everyone struggles with. But my breakdown was kind of fundamental like universe creation things, right? So if you have change, which is the take something and turn it into something else, then other fundamental things are creation, which is something from nothing, destruction, which is something into nothing, and I'm one of the people who advocate for stasis, although I'm not super sold on the idea. However, all of this stuff comes with a big caveat, and that is that these words are not good. These words, much like the words we use to describe shards, are not great at describing the complexity and the depth of these things. And the example I really like for illustrating this is that the quote-unquote destruction Dawnshard, which everyone is going to think ruin when they hear that. Mm-hmm. If I think of this Dawnshard as something into nothing, kind of vagueness, right? I really like odium for like one of the shards being associated with it, because of the entire concept of the void and like feeding the void, like your emotions, your something turns into nothing as you give it up. And so this kind of transfer.
I just don't like make and unmake. I just don't like.
So what you're saying is the unmade Dawnshard?
No. I guess the way I think about it is like, if you have make, like, isn't that just creation? Why do you need anything else if you can just make stuff? I don't know.
Yeah. Because you then end up with garbage.
My issue with create is that investiture as a whole is described as the powers of creation.
Right.
Like in its entirety.
Yeah.
So it's like, but like this subset is like actually creation, and all the other stuff is not. Like even like ruin is described as like the powers of creation.
Yep. And I just like ruin as like under the change bucket too much to like that, because like I remember where Brandon said, yeah, cultivation and ruin, yeah, there's some synergy there, and it's like I that feels like a nice pairing to me, whereas I just, and also destruction is just like, here's the evil shards go in this bucket. It's like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't like it.
Well, but that's why I'm putting the big asterisk that says destruction is a terrible name for this.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess like
it is the minus sign of
it could be the void. You just call it that.
Yeah.
Void? I mean, sure.
I mean, it has to be a command, right? So,
void. Yeah. That's void can be a verb.
Yes, true. You're voiding a check.
I voided that check.
All those checks that we write these days.
If destruction is turning something into nothing, wouldn't that also kind of just fall under change? Because that's a change.
Exactly.
Yep. Change is so broad that I mean,
they're all going to be pretty broad.
Yeah.
Well, all of these are valid, right? And I acknowledge the issues with this breakdown, and I am not super sold on it anymore. I'm kind of gravitating more towards the kind of life-y description of Dawnshards. These, so like think and feel are very interesting because so if I'm the way I approach this to begin with is I'm a Donalsium, I'm creating things. How am I creating things? What are the commands that I use to create the Cosmere, right? And so the thing that was obvious to me was like, well, primal matter manipulation, right? I can create matter, I can destroy matter, I can change matter, I can keep matter the same. Let's not worry about that one. But through conversations with other people, I am becoming fond of the idea that stuff in the Cosmere, and that includes life, that includes inanimate matter, stuff in the Cosmere, because it exists on multiple realms, is kind of like life. Like if you have a rock, right? We've seen soulcasters interact with inanimate objects, and those inanimate objects have life-like properties in the Cosmere.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so I am growing more fond of the idea that the primal commands that Adenausium used were more relevant to life, such as think, such as feel, maybe connect, maybe remember, and things like that.
I think I like Grace's the best. Think and feel are pretty good. Yeah, it's tricky though. These are tricky.
Preservation's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, this is gonna be controversial.
Okay.
But I think preservation is under change. Because it is a lack of change.
Yeah.
It is a lack of change, and I think that counts as that.
I mean, yeah.
You have maybe like cultivation is change in its purest, or maybe cultivation is like growth, ruin is negative change, preservation is lack of change, and then maybe endowment is like changing others as your four change things.
I am not morally opposed to
like
this.
it's not that preservation is changing things, it's just it's talking about change in that it is,
and the different ways you can interact with change in the world.
Okay. And I think that is nice and useful because Sazed's like, these belonged together. Like, so it is kind of weird if they were in different buckets, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, right? Because if we are categorizing them, unless some people are like, it's a 4x4 matrix, and you go down the columns and the rows, and some are in one bucket.
Yeah, Grace is one of these people.
Okay, my thought process is that you have the 4 buckets, but then you have like within the bucket, it's like I'm not super sold on this, but like what, like if you have like connect, it's like what does it mean to connect to change? I don't know. I'm not as sold on that anymore.
Yeah,
but
I am very moved by this preservation as
I know. That's like, and that like helps me talk like that. It's not that the shards are in line with that Dawnshard. It's just, it's like a topic, you know?
Yes.
The topic is change, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a theme.
I am going to be a person that says, no, I don't agree with that. I wouldn't be upset if it was true, but I don't think lack of change is a type of change. It's a type of not change.
I'm not saying it's a type of change. I'm saying it's how can you interact with change in the world? And like choosing not to at all is like a way of, if that makes sense.
I just think philosophically I don't see it that way, but I would not be upset if it was like that. I just feel like in the Dawnshards, since there's 4 of them, they don't fit neatly into the 3 realms, so I don't know if they each could be tied to a 3 realm thing, but I do feel like there is something that should indicate cognition and something that could indicate some sort of spiritual side of things. But I don't, just because of how fundamental the 3 realms are.
Then you have the temporal one. No.
The one where Brayden's like, why did I make it 4?
Is change.
I guess so.
Yeah, but I've never liked trying to categorize shards by realms because it doesn't really work.
It's
so I don't want to try to do it like, it's just, now we're going to categorize the Dawnshards by realms. So I don't really like it.
And I think it's really important to keep in mind that the more categorization we try to apply these things, the more unlikely it is that Brandon applied the same categorization to all of these things. Because when we go, 4 Dawnshards, 2x2 matrix, 3 realms, pushing and pulling, internal and external. I don't think Brandon
does that. Like, that's why I don't like the 4x4 matrix. I'm just like, I don't think Brandon works like that.
Which ones are the end positive and neutral and end negative Dawnshards?
Yes, the internal pulling end positive second quadrant pushing Dawnshard.
Yeah. You're playing 4D chess with the shards. And only Adenausium can see it. But I don't know, like there are a lot of emotion-y shards, and like so preservation being about like how does stuff change or not change, but being very broad about it. Like, well, I mean, it's definitely seems like a different thing than honor and stuff, and right.
Like, I mean, like honor and preservation are 2 very different things. And if you just saw those 2,
and like devotion, ambition, like those are like they're more abstract. Whereas like I'm really liking cultivation, ruin, preservation. But initially, I was just like, preservation doesn't go in the change book because it's not change. So like, I think rephrasing that was really important and useful.
Yeah, I think I put honor in like the same bucket as Dominion.
Damn,
I don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know much about what Dominion
that.
actually is, but that was sort of the...
Yeah.
Were those under bind?
Yeah. Or I guess Connect. I think those both kind of
Connect's
work for that.
nice. I do like Connect.
Yeah.
I prefer bind because I do want to distinguish from connection.
That's true.
Oh, this is a thing that maybe Jess told me this. Someone did. I think Jess. She was saying, "Oh, the reason why Dawnshards bind mortal or any creature, voidish or mortal, is because they just go into any of the creatures like that." Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is a simple explanation. Not that
they're
Dawnshards are
universal.
Used to
they are fundamental.
So they can attach to anything. So that's another way to read that rather than like using it as a weapon.
Unlike Spren, who are more picky.
I guess so. So speaking of weapons, we literally we haven't really talked. We talked about the 4 primal commands. That sentence that's there, but we didn't talk about this sentence. And then eventually they were used to undo Adenalsium itself. So I just would like to say, and I think this is Ian, who constantly tried to persuade me that the force that opposed Adenalsium, like that stuff, right? Because I got a lot of those wobs about Adenalsium's opposition and stuff, and you were like, "It's not force. It's just this group of people," and that Brandon was trolling me. But could be referring to people using Dawnshards and stuff. So there could be magical aspects here.
But it's still people.
I think there is 100% a magical aspect. It's just the opposition is just the people who oppose Adenalsium. They just had magic helping them.
I guess. So interestingly, at first I was like, oh, one Dawnshard was used as a weapon. But this says, and then eventually they, like the 4 primal commands, were used to undo Adenalsium. So that seems to me that it's all 4 Dawnshards working. That seems to be what that is implying, right?
Yeah.
Or at least more than one.
Yeah.
I
guess they might not have had all 4, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be more than one, right? I
think it was all 4. Like,
I think
it's so.
Very likely that it's all 4. Yeah.
It's almost like the mural helps that because like it's 4, right? So I think you would maybe need all 4.
Ooh,
yeah,
because it was described as like the pulling apart. What if it was like the 4 Dawnshards were used to pull?
I think I used the word pull.
Okay.
I used the word pull to kind of imagine, like, I mean, it says ripped apart, but the word pull isn't used. So just
okay.
So they're all pulling Dawnshards.
That was like an alternate idea of like why the shards might be themed around the Dawnshards. Like if the 4 Dawnshards were pulling and ripping, is like the section of investiture that got ripped out by that Dawnshard got flavored by that Dawnshard and then split into 4, possibly.
I think that is where my like 4x4 like matrix idea came from. It's like, well, you pull Adenalsium apart once to get like the major buckets, and then you pull each second part again with like the Dawnshards, and like within the major bucket, each section is attracted to another Dawnshard. Like, I don't really like that anymore, though.
I think there is some truth to, because like what the mural depicts, right, is it's a sun, and then that sun is broken into 4 pieces. I imagine it's 4 quadrants, right? Otherwise it's just silly. And then each one of those quadrants is then further broken into 4 pieces. I might be reading too much into a freaking mural in the Undersea Caverns of Amia.
Hey, all this is important.
But if the entire sun is Adenalsium, then splitting the entire sun into 4 doesn't need to mean each one of the 4 divisions is a Dawnshard. But I think it does. I think in the context of, well, we are just about to learn that there are 4 Dawnshards, this is the obvious connection to make. And then we further divide like each one of the 4 chunks. which they are all associated with a specific Dawnshard, into 4 individual shards. And so
sure,
it is not that they were used to pull Adenausium apart. It is almost as if they were a part of Adenausium in some aspect, which if they were commands uttered by it, it can. There's connection
sense.
there.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah, right, exactly.
And so like maybe they were like pulled out of Adenausium and like carried chunks of it with themselves in a way, almost like Grace's like breaking Adenausium's mind into 4 pieces idea. But I think like they were in some way part of Adenausium.
I do think I could see that. I do think it's interesting that they were pulled into 4 and then they again split into 4.
Super interesting.
You know what I mean? Like they
it's
didn't end
very
up as 4 shards of Adenausium. Ended up as 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to... So, like, this is referring to about Dawnshards used to shatter Adenausium. So, I asked about the force opposing Adenausium, and Brandon said... Oh, this is Words of Radiance. All right, 2014. We're doing a history lesson here. There was a weapon created by the opposition of Adenausium. Okay, then in 2016... Brandon just says, the weapon was expended and no longer exists in its original form. Okay. Then, 2016, is Odium aware of the weapon? And Brandon's yes. That's another book of mine. This is a path. But, the best one. Idaho Falls, 2018.
No one has ever said Idaho Falls that enthusiastic.
No. Guys. Get ready. Valhalla. So you talked about a weapon made by the enemies of Adenausium, and you said it doesn't exist in its original form. Do any remnants of it still exist in the physical realm? Brandon, yes. Valhalla. Have we seen any of those on screen? Brandon pauses. Says Raffo. Then says more things. And then he says... In current continuity, and people would know this, Hoid's immortality comes from this. People who have read Dragonsteel know that. So, how about I read this annotation that Brandon wrote here, which refers to this. So, Brandon says, Hoid was a Dawnshard at some point in the deep past, and the reason he, even still, cannot physically harm people or even eat meat is related to the changes this made to his spirit. Consider this the same fundamental principle as savanthood. The few of you who have read Dragonsteel know that him being a Dawnshard was also the source of his immortality in that book, though the terms were different back then. And in parentheses, the word Dawnshard was never mentioned, for example, though the primary story of Dragonsteel, with another set of parentheses, which is no longer canon, was about several people who unwittingly become Dawnshards. So, like, if you saw my facial expression a little bit ago, because we saw this earlier at the release, I was like, wow, cool. I did not remember that previous one where Brandon was saying that. I was like, whoa. So, one, the remnants of the weapon are the Dawnshards. I think that's pretty clear. And they are in the physical realm. Yeah, that makes sense. If the Dawnshards were used in the weapon or something like that, like you can't use the Dawnshards that way anymore because whatever they created to do the shattering, maybe that broke or was used. But I think the Dawnshards are that remnant.
Yeah, well, they could have been in a different form before they were used to do this. You know what I mean?
That's super true.
We don't know what they looked like before the shattering.
Dawnshards are new lore. We don't know how the Dawnshards were affected with the shattering. That's a very good point.
And it's like one of the Dawnshards is different. What if one of the Dawnshards no longer functions?
And what if it's a topaz?
Yes. Okay. So right. So I think there has been an idea floating around since Thursday, where when this was posted, this is all so new that like one of the Dawnshards being different could be that it's like one was destroyed or used or expended. But to me, with those wobs about the weapon, which you can simply read, I just searched Adenalcium weapon, got all of them, easy. Thanks, Arcanum. I don't think the weapon is the Dawnshards itself, because if the Dawnshards are commands, right? By themselves, they don't do anything, right? So you need more stuff to work. So whatever the 4 Dawnshards were used with, they use some sort of power in some specific way, and that broke Adenalcium. And I think whatever that thing is of that weapon, that no longer exists for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. I think I can agree with that.
Okay, so I'm gonna not talk about Dragon. I'm gonna attempt to talk about Dragonsteel, but not actually say anything useful. Because I remember we talked about that word of Brandon about, oh yeah, Hoid's immortality comes from this. And and Brandon was just like, people would know this. People who read Dragonsteel know this. I've read Dragonsteel. This was not obvious to me at all.
There's also a wob where Brayden kind of goes, well, you know what Dawnshards are. And someone goes, what? And he goes, well, I guess I'm not going to tell you. And I'm like, probably because he's been asking him about the weapon for 8 years. And he's like, well,
did I do that?
About the weapon.
I don't think I did.
No, it was someone else who was asking about Dawnshards. And he was kind of like, I think I've told you what the Dawnshards are. And they're like, you have not? Yeah.
Well, I always...
Well, so I haven't read...
Okay, yeah. What are your feels? Because this is really hard for me to talk about because I don't want to give anything away.
So my takeaway from these wobs, so from the annotation and the Idaho Falls, is so Idaho Falls says, in current continuity, Hoid's immortality comes from this, and this sounds like it's referring to the weapon.
Well, it's in response to the remnants on screen specifically.
Okay, so either the weapon or the remnants.
Yeah, there's room for interpretation there, but
I can see either go. So that is point A. Hoid's immortality comes from either the weapon or the remnants of that weapon. Hoid was a Dawnshard.
Yep.
Changes to the spirit, yada, yada, yada. The few of you who have read Dragonsteel know that him being a Dawnshard was also the source of his immortality. So, A plus B, either the weapon or the remnants of that weapon that killed Adenalcium were the Dawnshards, because that is the source of Hoid's immortality.
100%. Yes.
In both of these wobs.
I totally agree.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I'm actually leaning towards Hoid's specific Dawnshard, or maybe any Dawnshard.
I think Hoid's specific Dawnshard.
Yeah, is a remnant of that weapon, and that is the source, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To go off into more speculative territory, I have also not read Dragonsteel.
Mm-hmm.
To circle back to Hoid and this being the source of his immortality, I feel like the topaz that Hoid has always talked about having had at one point likely has something strongly to do with this Dawnshard. He's been
the first gem.
Yeah, the first gem. The first gem,
right?
As
exactly.
It's called. That sounds like Dawn, and just if
like
there
the
is
first gem,
yeah,
you know,
and there is a Dawnshard that's different than the rest, and we know that there's something going on with this topaz, because I think it's Frost who asks him, have you given up on the gemstone now that it is dead?
Yeah, because
so I do think that if there was a Dawnshard that had something wrong with it or some change had happened to it, it might have been the Dawnshard that influenced Hoid.
That ties into a crack theory that I kind of have.
Okay,
let's hear it.
We're going deeper and deeper.
So I know a lot of people kind of speculate that Hoid is trying to reform Adenalcium or something, but after reading this, I think Hoid is trying to create a new Dawnshard or something, or maybe if there's this dead topaz, recreate this, because
or revive it.
Yeah.
I think reviving a Dawnshard is more plausible than creating a new one. Pretty much only Adenalcium could do that.
Yes, and that's from the Traveler when Frost tells Hoid what you're doing is impossible. That's because previously only Adenalcium could create Dawnshards, but Hoid is no, things are different now. Maybe if I get enough power from enough different sources, I'll have this chance to revive the Dawnshard.
We're bringing this all into so many different weird crap.
Going back to the topaz, I have always ascribed to the theory that the topaz was an aether.
Which I haven't read that. But I know there's things.
Yeah.
I don't know if Brandon has been asked about that. I vaguely remember something, but I could 100% be imagining that. However, we do know that aethers predate Ad Nauseam. Or not, predate the Shattering, rather. Predate the Shattering. So theoretically, aethers could be tied to the Dawnshards somehow, maybe.
I didn't find anything on the topaz and aether specifically.
Okay.
At least in my quick search. And if you forgot in Way of Kings, Hoid's just telling Kaladin, it's like, hey, I used to have a gemstone and now it's useless for, right? Like that and he just says that.
And he was named for it and they called him Topaz for a period of time.
And Words of Brandon do say that is Topaz.
But we do know like aethers can die. So like,
yeah.
We don't know anything about aethers.
We don't know anything canon about aethers, but I do really like.
Other than they're very difficult to remove from your clothes.
That's right. That is canon.
That is canon.
Or at least that specific aether. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If aethers predate the Shattering, and you needed some fundamental other magic other than just a Dawnshard to kill Ad Nauseam, maybe it was like an amplified aether.
Okay.
I don't know what aethers do. I haven't read Aether of Night.
Me either.
It's different.
I will say I have always and repeatedly maintained that I had no idea what Dragonsteel Prime fitting it into the overall Cosmere, because I was like, nothing seems to make sense. Like I don't know what. I mean, you obviously get Hoid in it. Like he's there. And it's like, but we know a lot of these things about him now. Like Brandon's been saying over the years, and like is in the books over the years. And I mean, I didn't remember what the hell's going on with Dawnshards, so I guess I should check that out. But that was not my.
They were not named.
That was right. But that was not unclear to me. Let's say, but it has been a while for me, so I could very well be forgetting.
So to recap all of this, because I think a lot of us agree on this, and I think it's really interesting. But we've also meandered a little bit, which is unusual for us. We usually stay on topic.
Yeah. We never meander, ever. We say this long into the podcast.
So we like the idea of, one, Hoid's immortality comes from the Dawnshard that he had. This Dawnshard was held by the first gem, contained by the first gem, somehow related to the first gem, right? Which is also related to him accepting the name of Topaz. But if this Dawnshard is the remnant of the weapon that killed Ad Nauseam, then by the time Hoids get his hands on the first gem, the weapon's already depleted. Like Ad Nauseam's already dead.
I think there's another way to talk about this, and not simply like however the weapon was used, like with very old wobs about very vague things. Brandon is very vague. I don't know if we need to I don't think we need to focus on the word remnant too much. It's just like parts of the weapon are still around, and like that could the Dawnshards could have changed in the Shattering, but it could be as simple as like if this. I don't know if Brandon is still going to go with this canonically, with him talking about people unwittingly becoming Dawnshards, but it could simply be that those people got together and would eventually shatter Ad Nauseam in some respect, right? And maybe that ruined the Topaz or something. Also, I guess I'm a little confused because Rissen's Dawnshard goes into her, and so it being in an item that then Hoid has doesn't quite gel for me with Hoid being the Dawnshard, which is how Brandon's phrasing said it, right? Does that make sense?
I have been playing around with the idea that we see investiture appear in a lot of different states of matter, and I don't know necessarily that all of the Dawnshards would exist in the same exact state of matter. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe the changed Dawnshard has a more gaseous, like breath type.
Okay, all right, yeah, all right, I buy that.
And maybe the topaz is a more solid form of a Dawnshard, and in some other way it would become a part of you.
Going off protection, stasis-y thing, whatever that could be, like I could imagine that being more solid. That does kind of make sense.
Yeah, that's another theory with no evidence. So feel free to not think that's true.
But feels good.
Like most of what we're talking about.
Yeah, most of what we're talking about here.
All right, so slight pivot. Hoid's immortality. Do we think that's something specific to his Dawnshard, or something that, like, if Risen holds her Dawnshard long enough, she will become immortal?
Next question, please.
Yeah. Because my brain is starting to hurt, I'm just going to stick to protection Dawnshard mumbo jumbo, and that it's specific to the Dawnshard he held, or he was.
It's interesting because it's like, was a Dawnshard, so he does not have, or is it currently, right? In whatever sense, right? So, and he talks about that like savantism in a sense. So that's interesting. So it could simply be, I mean, presumably Hoid had some magic canonically with said Dawnshard and could
light waving at least, yeah.
Right, yeah. Risen maybe by herself right now, no, because she cannot use the Dawnshard. Like she has some latent bonuses from having this sort of investiture. I mean, it has investiture, but it's not shard, right?
If it's equivalent to a heightening, you only need like 5th to be immortal, right?
Right. Sorry. Let me finish my thought. Like, if Risen somehow no longer had the Dawnshard, I'm not sure. Like, she would still have the effects that Hoid does. Whereas, like, Hoid presumably utilized the gemstone in some respect and killed it. Yeah. So it's like that's a savanty thing, right? Where you're using something so much that it's warping yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that still persists, even if you're not doing that.
You're ageless while you have the breath.
Yes.
Hoid is still seemingly immortal without it.
Right.
Yeah, there's some weird things going on here because I did... this is not 100% useful to us, but I did ask Brandon about his savantism comment. And the only answer he gave was that Risen would change, because like I was thinking that the reason he's making this comment is because, well, if you are savant and you're using magic a lot, it kind of builds up and accumulates in your spirit web over time, and it changes it over time. And so the more you use it, the more you change. And so is he comparing Dawnshards to savantism because the longer you hold the Dawnshard, the more it's quote unquote accumulating, the more it's changing your spirit web. And the only thing that he explicitly confirmed was that the Risen will change over time as a result of holding the Dawnshard.
I kind of want to see like space age Risen in like sci-fi mobility technology, owning a spaceship, like traveling to minor planets to make trade deals.
Sounds awesome.
Era 4.
Put some armor on giant Cherry being a space dragon or something. Sure. Yeah, I'm down.
The helmet.
Yeah. Some other things about Risen. Risen did not use the Dawnshard on the Sleepless. She's incapable of using the command, but that's presumably because she doesn't have a source of investiture. Are there any other words of Brandon? All the Dawnshards give the heightening equivalent effects.
Yeah, I think we touched on this either in this episode or the last episode, but anyone who is sufficiently invested for a sufficiently long period of time will also get these heightening-like effects. They're not specific to breaths, they're not specific to the Dawnshards. And the reason people like the Mistborn and the Knights Radiant don't get that is because they are just kind of operating on bursts of power. And so the way I think of it is that the power doesn't have enough time to like build up in their soul. And yes, Risen has only had the Dawnshard for like a few hours by the time we see the effects. But I think the way the Dawnshard operates is different from just like holding Stormlight. It integrates in her soul, I think, in a way similar to how breaths do.
More similar to breath. I do agree.
Yeah.
So like members of the Weiry probably, who are like hundreds of years old and have been Elantrians.
Oh yeah, they do have a lot of
effects.
investiture. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's totally fair.
I wonder if that would develop, just like over time as they get old.
As they have more investiture flowing through them the entire time.
I would not be surprised if like the Weiry have the equivalent of upper heightenings.
Yeah.
Right? Because what they're essentially doing is they're what the heightenings are, you're becoming more shard-like, or at least endowment-like.
Right.
And so while some of the abilities that you get from heightenings, such as, the ability to awaken metal, will not necessarily apply to all types of investiture, I think there are other things, such as the function of immortality at level 5, or heightening 5, that you will get from any kind of investiture if you have enough for a long enough period of time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Weiry and Elantrians in general, I think that's a really interesting point.
Elantrians in general, but they were the ones I thought of as like knowing they were old.
Knowing they're old and they have a lot of investiture all the time, that makes sense.
Looking at you, Galadon.
Yeah, pretty much though. One other thing, a word of Brandon, you asked Argent about you were asking semantics about what to call the Dawnshard, and Brandon just said, I haven't honestly decided yet. I'm playing with several themes for the Dawnshards even still. So probably has ideas, but maybe it's the same issue that we have. It's like choosing the right word's kind of hard. And if Brandon has this in the cosmology and it's been important and presumably has been for a while, but all the details aren't.
It's like how he has ideas for the shards, but it takes him a while to pick the name.
Yeah, right. I think that's exactly this sort of situation.
I'm not sure if he was answering specifically about the semantics, because I was asking, hey, how do we refer to these things, right?
Yeah.
Is it the change Dawnshard? Is it the Dawnshard of change? Stuff like that. So I'm not sure if he was answering just the semantics, or if he hadn't really decided on. I guess they're related subjects, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Someone wanted to say Hoid is a Dawn sliver, and Brandon's like, I'd be okay with that. I don't know.
Add it to the wiki.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I don't hate that. So
it conveys
there are
the
a lot
idea.
of things I don't hate in this episode.
It conveys the idea. I just don't like the term.
I just don't. Sliver is just such a
Sliver
weird.
Of dawn.
Sliver is just a weird word, and that I'm more confused about as we go along. Honestly, it was simpler in 2010.
But being a sliver, I feel, is not too dissimilar from being a savant in many ways.
Yeah,
because your spirit web is warped and shaped by the investiture you've used or you've held.
I totally agree with that. That's kind of a similar thing.
There's a wub that the city of Elantris is basically a savant, so.
Oh, really? I kind of forgot that.
Well, it's someone asked about the actual city walls and it was crumbling or something, and Brandon was like, yeah, it was glowing, it was infused for investiture for a really long time, and that changed the spirit web.
Mm-hmm. That's why all the stone was so weak, and they were accidentally breaking stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know the wab is just the savant bit that threw me off.
I know, but if you
it's what savants are though, so
yeah, it's just weird to call it that. Any final thoughts before we go? I'm tired.
Want to go to sleep.
I had all my thoughts. Yeah.
I'm more confused with intent versus command. I'm kind of more confused, but I'll focus on this when I'm more awake. We recorded these one after another. It's been a while. We've been here a long time.
I think we started at 1 p.m. or we got on the call at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
It is now almost 8 p.m.
Yeah, that is accurate.
Yeah.
This is our love for the subject. This is why we're here.
We are not doing Who's That Cosmere Character?
No, we are absolutely not. No, we didn't do it in the last one. We're not doing it here. We're over 2 hours of 44 minutes in the raw file. So, we're skipping Who's That Cosmere Character. It will come back. Don't worry. It's not canceled. But
we could do Who's That Dawnshard? There's only 2 options, so we
Hoid,
can just throw it
listen.
away.
Yeah. We have 2 options.
Who's that Dawn Vessel?
We'll obviously this is brand new lore. We will be talking about this a lot in a lot of ways. Like this is super new.
Yeah.
The only closing thought I have is that it's been a very long time since I've just stared at a passage in a Brandon book and like read the passage and I'm like, I know what these words mean. I have no idea what they mean.
It's kind of really fun to not know what Brandon like, because we've figured out so much, and I love how there's another layer still. Like this is like a brand new dimension that we didn't have in the Cosmere. Give me that.
I felt genuinely intimidated by the amount of lore we got from this book, and so you know how the Cosmere has been around for a little over a decade and a half by this point.
Yep.
So far, we've been focusing so much on shards. Like,
shards.
What are the shards? Has been the big mystery of our lives.
Yeah, right.
I feel like the next decade is gonna be
what are the
Dawnshards?
And by the way, makes sense. They're called Dawnshards because they're the early ones. So, like, sure.
Though I wonder if, like, in other places in Cosmere, if they have different names.
Probably.
I think they would. It's a very Rasharan name.
I do wonder if the early Rasharan things like Dawn Singers and Dawn Cities were like inspired by the Dawnshards when it came to their naming.
They're all connected in the spiritual realm. All right, this is really cool. We're gonna talk about it a bunch, and you guys can talk about it a bunch too at 17shard.com. And you can come on our forums. You come in our Discord server. It's been busy and will only get busier. Next Tuesday with Rhythm of War. So if you thought this was a lot, there's a way bigger Stormlight book coming your way. And as I said in my review, there's a lot of lore. How about that? That's what I said. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can subscribe on YouTube, like on YouTube, comment below. If you like our stuff, you can support us on Patreon. And yeah, we'll see you next time. It won't be too long. I don't think.
Bye.
Good luck, war stuff. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheerio.
Peace.
Caw.